A very warm welcome to everybody watching, especially our esteemed guest, Professor Cheryl Foxcroft, who I am such a big fan of, and I'm so excited I can't even contain myself. I've been trying to stop smiling for the past 10 minutes, and I really cannot. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us today.
Pleasure. It's lovely to be with you, to have a chat with you.
Thank you so much. In a time such as Women's Month, we all celebrate one another and each other's success becomes our own. So to have an opportunity to showcase those that have gone before us and really set the tone and have been trailblazers is such an honor. And for us to be able to learn from you is such a privilege for us. So I just want to thank you for that.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
Thank you. So, Professor Foxcroft, who was your inspiration growing up, and which female figure do you admire the most now?
Sure. That's an interesting question. So I think there were a range of people rather than one person. So I actually at school had a very difficult teacher. But I think the teacher realized that she was a female, an older female. And I think she realized that I don't always understand my full potential, as I sometimes coast. And so whilst I didn't necessarily like her because she used to jump on me and push me, when I look back, that was actually quite an important part of my development. So it's almost like retrospectively, I admired her as such in terms of I finally understood what she was trying to do. That certainly helped me in my development. I think when I moved on to university, I don't really know that as a student. Yeah, I think there was one lecturer in my psychology class that I think in some ways I modeled some of my lecturing on eventually. And what inspired me about her was that she was able to connect the real world to the content that we were covering in class. So it was actually a child development course that she taught, and she had a toddler at that stage. And so we kind of went through the phases of the toddler development, but it was just so authentic and how she was connecting that real world. So that I admired greatly in her. We also had a maths lecturer, a female maths lecturer, which is also quite unusual. And she was also a very good musician. And just her competence in her subject, but also her humaneness in connecting with students was quite a good role model for me. And then I think as I moved from student life to being a lecturer, there were probably various role models as I kind of developed even role models from other universities. So as I began to develop as a leader, there was a very good DVC academic from the University of the Free State that I actually thought embodied what a DVC academic should be. And so I certainly learned a hang of a lot from her. So currently, I work with a lot of brilliant female leaders, Prof being one, and I've certainly learned a lot and been inspired by her style of leadership and also the growth I've seen in her leadership since she joined us. So she's probably the person that inspires me the most at the moment.
Wow, that was so incredible to hear. And I love your humility, Prof. Foxcroft, because you are such an inspiration yourself. And I'm sure you are the answer to this question for so many young women. And I love to hear that you have grown so much with your colleagues and learned so much along the way. And I can truly say that you have been a leader to be reckoned with during COVID-19 and the shift to online learning. Really, we felt such a calm and peace during such a troubling time because we had you as our leader. And really, you were so calm yourself and you were such a peaceful leader, and leading us towards the way that we should go in a way that we trusted everything because of the manner in which you took that approach. So I just wanted to know from you, what was your biggest challenge during that time?
So my biggest challenge was, other than, as a leader, you're always going to find yourself in that moment where you have no clue how to actually do this. So, I mean, when we got sent home end of March 2020, and once we got our heads straight that it wasn't just going to be a couple of weeks and then we'd be back in class, and that actually we had students all over the world, and somehow we were going to have to teach them. So, that was a daunting task. But first thing is, from my leadership perspective, is it's always going to be done as a collective. No one person had all the answers. I had to play a leadership role, and certainly thinking out the possibility of different pathways was a concept I came up with, but I had to work with my other leaders to see if that was going to land and to flesh that out. So on the one hand, it was that dealing with that unknown that was a big challenge, and that the weight of responsibility, if we didn't get the teaching done, the university would crumble. It's as simple, and most important, the students would have lost a year. So it was a huge weight of responsibility. The one that I grappled with the most personally was how to communicate with that needed to the plans we were coming up with. Because from my leadership sort of style, that I need to be engaged with people, I need to almost be in the boat with people whilst also giving lead. And in Fees Must Fall, it was a whole lot easier for me because I could actually personally connect with people, physically, could meet with groups and could listen to challenges and try and motivate and inspire them. But suddenly that wasn't possible. And now I had to come up with a new plan as to how to overcome that challenge, because just doing it online isn't sufficient for me. And it wouldn't have been, I think we got a bit better with online as time went by, but there in the early part of the pandemic, it was still very unknown. And so that's where I hit on that idea of writing letters as a way to, because I knew I needed to keep everybody moving together, and in a sense share information, but also share information that would, where possible, both connect with the real emotions that people were going through because they were tough times, but also try to inspire people to keep moving forward, to keep trying new things and so on. So that was a quite interesting learning experience. I know way back in my teenage years, I did a bit of that sort of writing, and it was interesting to get back to that style again. And it's been interesting to see how the letters landed with different people. It's had a life way beyond what I imagined the life was going to be for. So that to me was the biggest challenge, how to connect with people and stay connected so that we could all move together, and not just the little leadership team that I worked more closely with.
Wow, thank you, Prof. Foxcroft. That's really inspiring. And I love to hear that honesty as well. It's so raw and honest. And I think our viewers as well are just going to be so excited to hear this. Now, in recent times, we know that feminism is growing and it's not as taboo as it was in the past. What are the most effective ways, in your opinion, to counteract negative stereotypes of feminism in the workplace, especially when we have strong leadership roles that are women?
Very, very interesting questions. So I think that, to me, I'll just answer it from my perspective, because it has been an interesting journey. When I first went into a more senior leadership position, I was the only female and my directors were all male. Um, and that was in the early merger stages, and there were lots of stereotypes also just from the institutions that were merging. It was a really interesting time to be a leader. But to me, it always comes back to you as a person. So you can you can work with other people's stereotypes in a sense by being yourself. It's when you try to make yourself into something that you think will connect properly. In my case, when I had sort of 4 or 5 male leaders working with me, to be who I was, and I had to be honest and open. And if I saw challenges that were sort of almost slightly sexist, then I would confront those, but in nice ways. And again, if you have the buy-in of people, so if your leadership competence and skills and your people skills, I would say, are such that you've connected with people, and the connection is there, then those sorts of challenges that arise can be addressed and overcome. And yeah, and you can grow quite a lot in the process. I don't know, it's probably not a very insightful answer that I've just given you. I don't know if you want to explore further.
No, Prof, it's very insightful indeed. And I think that what we can do at an undergraduate level for our students is teach them the importance of equality, not the rise of females and the fall of men, but equality. We want equality for both genders. We want both genders to be able to become successful and actually demand respect in their own. So, why do you think it is so important for us to celebrate Women's Day as a university?
Very important. On the one hand, obviously, because it's something that's celebrated in the country, not just at the university. So it's a national imperative. And certainly when you look at women in the workplace, if I compare, my mother was also, she worked in the library at the university. And when I look at what happened to her, she was not given the same salary as a male because she wasn't considered to be the breadwinner, but actually she was the breadwinner because she was a single parent. And by the time she retired, she was getting a pittance. So, and there are still almost relics of some of that in our system, where we had periods where there was far greater discrimination almost against the equality of males and females. And so to continually almost celebrate the fact that women play as important roles as men in our society, and can rise to all sorts of positions, I think is terribly important. And for the younger students as well to see that is very important, because from very patriarchal cultures and societies as well, for example. So I think we've got that obligation to celebrate. As a university, I think we've done very well with diversifying, certainly at leadership levels, the gender. In fact, it's probably tipping in the other direction now. But we need to almost then celebrate what we've been able to do, why that's important. And so I think that's why, to me, Women's Day is such an important one.
Yes, I agree 100%, Professor. That is very, very true indeed. And now, just to branch off a little bit, our university is well renowned globally for our research in all faculties and in all disciplines. What advice would you give to young female researchers, and what was the most important piece of advice that was given to you?
So from a research perspective, I think you have to, and particularly when I'm thinking of the younger academics, you have to find your way, you have to find your niche. But that doesn't happen overnight, and it also doesn't necessarily happen. It's like an incremental process. You might sort of fire widely with topics, because often you go with topics a student wants to do for their research and so on. And you'll see a bit of that in my CV, in fact, in the earlier years. But for me, what actually firstly gave me a trajectory was my doctorate. So I think the topic that you choose for your doctorate is incredibly important, because you're going to invest in that for a long time to come, and you've got that opportunity to develop depth in that area. And what happened to me, so my topic was on a psychological test, because my background is in psychology. Psychological test, it was only it was developed in the States, and was technically only really useful for white children. And my doctorate then looked at other cultural groups and how you adapt the test for their purpose. And eventually I ended both teaching in that area, but also my whole research focus then went into psychological assessment. And that then became the area. It played itself out in various spaces as well. It could be within the particularly child assessment, but also neuropsychological assessment, and then eventually into best practices and ethics related to assessment. So to me, a key point was getting that doctorate shaped. I always tell my doctoral students that one of these A4 black books, I was almost on the last page when I actually finally found my topic. And so I advise my doctoral students not to worry if it takes us 2 years to find the right topic, because that's just going to be a catalyst for so much else going forward. And then to be able to work within after, so that you together are building a research area, for example, I think is also very important.
Yes, Professor, and you are such an established researcher yourself with over 52 publications and counting. And it's always interesting to read your work, Professor. So can you tell us which has been your favorite study thus far and why?
That's a very interesting question. I think why I'm struggling to answer that one is obviously what happened to me as I moved out of psychology in the sense of a psychology department, and I moved more into the management side. So my research also slightly diversified, and I looked a lot more around student success issues linked to access, for example, and so on. But probably my home base remains psychological assessment. And probably the most exciting piece of research we've done is we've worked on a child development measure that's used internationally. It's an international measure. But the Nelson Mandela team was actually tasked with doing the revision of the latest version, for example. And so to work across countries to develop such a measure and all the psychometrics that go with it was a really exciting experience. And now I hear that it's used in over 50 countries and been adapted in those countries, for example, and so on. So it's great to be involved in projects that have spin-offs where you can see impact, because obviously we always link assessment to, so if there are fallouts, what development work do we do with the children, for example, and so on. So yeah, so that's probably that whole area. There's a range of different projects I've been involved in like that, where you can see eventually the impact.
Yes, Professor. And we can just tell that you are a natural born leader and it comes so naturally and fluently to you. So I just want to know from you, how can we encourage more women to be like this and to pursue leadership roles, especially in their careers?
Okay. I mean, so the very interesting thing for me is that I never actually perceived myself to be a leader. And I think a lot of leaders are like that. When when you look back, you can see, oh yeah, I was always doing X, Y, and Z. I was always taking charge of this or whatever. So there was clearly development happening. But it was only as I got into other leadership roles. So as a student, I was involved in student society work, and I was exposed to some leadership development there, which I think gave me a certain grounding. But then as I moved in the university into these other leadership roles, I suddenly realized that I didn't actually know enough about leadership. So I may have had some natural qualities, but I couldn't articulate what I was doing so that I could do it again. And so I did two things. I did a lot of reading and reflecting on those readings, but I also watched a couple of good leaders that I thought I could connect with, see what they did. And to me, it was always leadership is about influencing people as much as it is about all these visionary things. But if you can't influence people, then you're not going to get very far. And so I think I observed people that were good influences and what they did. Sometimes it was simple mannerisms. So, for example, I'm very short. I know that in these virtual spaces, we can't see that. And it's always been interesting when you finally see the person, they're either taller or shorter than you imagine. But I'm very short. And what I noticed of some really good leaders was they use their height to slightly impose themselves on people. And so I sometimes, if I'm in a room, and I'll use examples of when we've had difficult conversations with students and things have been a bit tense, then I actually sometimes get up and walk around, but just to almost elevate myself as such above where the rest are, as a way of trying to kind of just impose myself slightly and get influence going. So I learned some tricks, I guess, is what I'm saying. I also learned tricks such as you don't have to fight all the battles in one go. And in fact, you need to know what the most important thing is for you to win, even in a meeting where you've got a particular document that needs approval. Be careful beforehand. Don't get everybody up the wrong way, because then they might jump on you and shoot your things down. So I learned those things. I learned a lot from reading. And then I think slowly what happened is it became part of my identity. And that's only quite recent, I'd say. It's only probably like 8 years or so that I would say that I began to see myself as a leader and then could reflect and learn. It's a constant journey of reflection and learning, because every day there are new things and new ways you need to approach things as a leader.
Yes, Professor, I agree entirely. And that is so interesting as well. And what we've seen, especially with the move to online learning, is our students, as well as ourselves, we are stuck behind this laptop screen. So that interaction and that growth really has been hindered. So when we started to transition a little bit back to that face-to-face activity, I was blown away by our students and how they have grown. A few of our students actually were in partnership with the Mosaic SA organization, where they were actually going to help underprivileged learners. And to see these small, timid students who you usually wouldn't even hear a peep out of come into their own and be so bold and brave and really take charge of the session with these learners and show them such love as well and understanding. And it was just so mind-blowing. And I was so humbled that these students were in the situation of online learning. They were robbed of opportunities to interact, but now that they've given this opportunity to be in a face-to-face setting, they're grabbing it with both hands.
Yeah.
So I was just so thrilled. So it really is about growing and learning and development. I 100% agree with that.
Mm, mm.
The last question from my side, Professor, is just a fun question, just for our viewers to enjoy as well.
Yes.
If you could have dinner with 3 inspirational women, dead or alive, who would they be and why?
That's now a really interesting one. I guess the question is also where we're going to dinner.
Yes.
So let me think about that. I think that our previous Chancellor Santi Botha, I connected very well with her. She's a very interesting, diverse lady, with lots of life experience of different, in her case, corporate contexts. And so she would definitely be one of those people that I would put in the room. So I know that I learned a lot from her just engaging with her. And then I think possibly somebody like Mother Teresa, that sort of the selfless nature that she portrayed, and the caring that she did for people in need, that resonates obviously very, very well with my values, but also the university's values. So I think I would love to have her in the room. I had a chance to engage with former Archbishop, or late Archbishop Desmond Tutu, which was a wonderful experience, but I couldn't put him in the room because obviously he's not a female. And who would the third one be, if I'm trying to think about that now? It might well be a younger person. Now I know that a couple of years back we engaged with some school learners who had won the prizes or bursaries in the Science Week. And I was very humbled by one of those scholars. I don't remember her name now. But she had overcome major challenges in life, and yet she was just so bubbly and was making such a contribution with what she was doing. So I would sort of put somebody like that in the room as well with me, almost a younger person that one can learn from, and there possibly a couple of our female students that could fit that bracket, and then we'd have a really good chat and learn from each other.
Yes, absolutely. That sounds like a very fun dinner indeed. And I know that the conversation would just be so rich. And I think that especially with what you've mentioned, Professor, having someone younger as well, we need to teach our young males and females that age doesn't matter and that you really can achieve anything at any age. So being young is not an intimidation factor. If anything, it is a platform to really showcase what you are made of. So thank you so much, Professor. I really enjoyed the session with you. It has been a blast. And I've been pinching myself this entire session because you would be one of the 3 inspirational women that I would have to dinner, Professor. So
Thanks for that.
thank you
We'll
so
make a date sometime.
Yes, please. I would really love that so much. And to everybody watching, I know that you would enjoy this so much. And if you have any questions, please let me know. My handle is andrea.govender@mandela.ac.za. Thank you very much, Professor Foxcroft.
Pleasure, lovely chatting.
Yes.